to everybody in Ireland that watches the film and enjoys the film. Very, very excited to have it out in that neck of the woods. The answer to the question is absolutely not. I always say, in fact, I said this today, that when I start making a film, and I'm also one of the producers on Catalyst. This is my seventh feature film as a producer. And I always say that when I start making a movie, it starts out in your head of what you think it's supposed to be, but ultimately it ends up becoming what it was supposed to be. And oftentimes that is radically different from what it is you initially envisioned in your mind, body, and spirit. And so the other thing that's very important is like you got to be a finisher. Your reputation will always precede you. And if you're known around town and around entertainment as not being a finisher, it's going to be really, really hard to get people to believe in the next project you're trying to birth and get off the ground. So whatever happens in between and the in-betweens is just the in-betweens. If I say I'm going to make a movie, I'm not going to not make a movie, however long it takes. But I never, on God's green earth, on the green pastures of Ireland, would I ever have imagined that it would have taken us over, 8 years to get this thing to completion. But here we are, and people are responding pretty well to it.
And David, when do yourself and Chris go back a good while? Do you go back even before 2017? And was this something that you had discussions about in the years previous? Where did this sort of idea and concept come from? And where did you finally say, right, let's go and do this? How did this conversation come about?
Yeah, I produced a short film that did really, really well on the festival circuit in 2006. And Chris Fulkin saw that project in Chicago, and we met in 2009 at a film festival in LA, both respectively with different short films. But he was a fan of the Project Soldier that I had done, and he approached me, and we got to know each other. And I saw his short film at the time I think it was called Diversion, and I was really blown away by his ability to tell a story. Hyper cinematic, very Michael Mann in his approach, and obviously you see that in Catalyst. And so we just connected like that as artists. And from 2009 to up until the beginning of Catalyst, we produced, I think, 2 or 3 short films together that he directed and I produced, films told entirely in spoken word poetry, and we toured film festivals in the short film circuit. And then ultimately we built this trust bond, not just as friends, collaborators, but ultimately became kind of brothers in the process, right? And as a result of that, he said, look, I want to do my first feature, and I'd love for you to help me produce it. And I said, okay, cool, let's run it, And we decided that we wanted to do something sort of experimental. And he, 9 years ago, got together a bunch of actors. I think it was like 20 actors in a warehouse, and then just basically had us improvise dialogue, and he was shooting it on lo-fi cameras, just as a social experiment to see what we could put together. And then he started coming up with some script ideas. And so that was basically the birth of it. So we were developing Catalyst for about a year and some change before we actually shot our first day in 2017. But we knew that we had a limited budget, but we wanted to do something compelling and high concept. So we said, look, let's just step into what we're manifesting and let's just start. Right? Because once you start, you're already in that motion. At that point, like I said, we are finishers. So once we decide to start something, we're going to finish. And so that's what we got together. We wrote 7 backstories about 7 men that are trapped in a warehouse with shock collars around their neck. They don't know how they've gotten there, and they can't escape, and they're being watched by their captors, surrounded by this energetic force field. And if they decide to attack each other, they all perish. Like, that was basically the skeleton of the story. So then we said, how can we write 7 characters that invariably would have to hate each other? Right. So we looked at all the social ills of America at the time, and even at a global level, like the clergy and the Catholic, the Catholic archdiocese and things that's happening with youth in the archdiocese. And then we looked at, black on black crime. We looked at, white officers killing unarmed black men in America. And we used this as sort of like a boiler keg to kind of create an environment where these men would literally be at each other's throats, but have to communicate as opposed to attack, which is what we typically do in humanity. What's my response to fear? My response to fear is anger and violence, right? But when I can't resort to anger and violence, what choice do I have? I either cower or I communicate. And so that's what we wanted to create in this thing. So we ended up with about 7.5 hours of raw footage of 7 men in a room, completely improvised dialogue. And so we took that improvisation, and Chris expertly cut it down to about 50 plus minutes. And then that informed the rest of the screenplay that we ended up writing, that was informed by the improvisation that we shot in 2017.
And David, what made you was initial thoughts for you to actually star in this movie, or was that a later idea? Are you on board first of all as a writer and producer, or when did you start to think to yourself, yeah, I want to be on front of the camera as well in this one?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I've always been an actor. I'm an artist first, right? Whether it's acting, directing, producing, writing, these are just ways of which I express my art. But I came to Hollywood with a BFA in theater. I'm a classically trained actor. And I came to Hollywood with the sheer determination to become a high level award winning actor. That was always my first purview. But when I got to LA, I quickly realized LA wasn't fucking waiting for me. I don't even know if I can say that, but I did. I didn't even know if LA was waiting for me, but they weren't. They didn't care. So I was a waiter and a bartender for 15 years. I got my SAG card doing extra work for 3 years. I lived with cockroaches for 3 years in two different apartments. There's no nepotism in my story. So I just came in here saying, I am going to do this. I'm not going to try the acting thing. I am an actor. This is my life. This is what I'm doing. I'm not going anywhere else. So I'm going to do this with sheer determination, no matter what. I'm going to attack the island and burn the boat. And that's how I live my life. And so producing happened as a necessity to create opportunities for myself in front of the camera. So Catalyst is essentially the side effect of producing things that I can act in for 20 years.
Yeah.
And over the course of 2 decades, I've gotten really good at producing independent film.
I was looking at the cast names here, and one particular name struck me there. I actually seen a good lot of his work. I've been a fan of his for a while now. He's always probably in the villain sort of roles in terms of that. Noel Gigliemi, sort of a renowned sort of an actor, sort of always plays that hard man type sort of role in terms of that. And was there connections there with Noel, and was it easy for you to sell him on this sort of concept? Been an independent
Yeah,
film.
well, we had no casting director on the project. I'm the casting director. So, it's just like any other industry. Some of the best advice I ever got in my career was from an old school actor. And he said, David, just keep showing up. And as long as you just keep showing up, you're going to get where you want to go. Right. And so as a result of producing up by the time I got to Catalyst, I'd already been producing independent film, I think at this point for 8 years. So I already had a community around me. So I called up Noel because I had shot a couple movies with Noel as an actor. So we had already had a relationship established. So I called up a bunch of actors in my phone, Patrick Kilpatrick, Michael Rourke, Noel Guglielmi. We put them all together and they believed in me because they had seen my body of work that led up to Catalyst. So they knew I was going to create something good and well executed and technically sound. So they knew they could trust me in that respect. But for me to call them up and say, hey guys, okay, this is the deal. There's no script. Let's start there. I'm going to give you a backstory, and I want you to look at this backstory, and I want you to dig in, and then you come up with your own versions of where did you lose your virginity? Where did you steal your first pack of gum? Were your parents alcoholics? Was your dad abusive? I need you to know everything inside and out about this human being, and we're going to go into one room. And we're going to do the most intense improvisation exercise, and we're going to shoot it live on 3 cameras. And by the way, no rehearsal. So I knew that I had to reach
Did
out to
anyone put down the phone?
nobody put down the phone. I mean, unanimously, everybody was like, sure, I guess. For many of these guys were just really honored that I called them for this kind of exercise because there are a lot of great actors out there. But not everybody has what it takes to do what we did in Catalyst. It takes a certain kind of performer to be able to get up there and have those types of chops, stay in character and be physical, scream, get aggressive and like be shoved around and push it to the limits and not break character. It takes a certain kind of performer. And Noel Guglielmi is one of those guys. I've known Noel, like Noel's a street dude, like, he's hard as nails. So I knew that he would bring it. And just so did everybody else on the cast. I mean, everybody